Okay, are we recording now? Oh yes. Hello. Hi Russell. Thanks for joining. So now we're doing recording of our third session in this module. Today we're going to be talking about business flows and the different components of it. We will start with giving a history of business flows and then drilling down to the strategic model of business flows. This would be followed by explanations on topics such as business drivers and also operating models. So I will hand over Russell to you now to walk us through. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ike. Yeah, it's always hard finding the best way to approach, say, what we're doing because it's grown over many years, and it's become in itself quite complex. But the baseline and the fundament of all our doing is has a lot to do with our, say, our history as well, from especially Jochen and Marcus and me, where we were working for a consulting company that was very focused around process methodologies, business process methodologies, and over the years we were always engaged in projects where companies actually utilize these methodologies to let's say optimize their business. And on the bottom line, in an industrial environment, optimizing means actually streamlining, be more profitable, managing growth, all the disruptions that can happen on a market, to manage them in a more professional, structured manner. And the fundament of all this, and this is not just, say, the company we used to work for, but if you look at the general common communicated approach around all these topics of operational excellence, business transformation, compliance, they are always business process oriented. Now, this has a reason. The business process itself, as a definition, helps to understand how to kind of like process, as the name says, certain inputs in order to create value. Now, it sounds very simple, but look at, say, a large industrial enterprise, it really becomes something that you need to manage in a professional manner. And what has been established over these years is a certain way of structuring this complexity. And like with the map, where you kind of like have a very high level, maybe kind of like a view of a country where you have the main motorways, you can kind of like then slowly zoom in and you get to even more details. And what we realized is that many years ago, the companies would pay a lot of money to actually build up these models. They would discuss the architecture, they would discuss the tools, all the conventions, and it would take a long time for them to even get a basic setup in order for them to be able to manage their changes. And companies don't have that time anymore. And we also have the experience to actually help companies get there faster. And we do this, and we did this to also kind of like communicate and show them that we have a lot of knowledge here. We built up business flows as a means of presenting the customer with something, a framework that he can use and adapt his specific setup and processes in a much faster way, without and relying on, let's say, common practices or best practices, and relying on reference models that he can then use as a template to then develop his specific processes. One of the core elements of this is the process architecture, where we have experience for very large enterprises down to mid-sized companies that it's sufficient to define 4 levels, so 4 kind of like levels of detail, in order to represent all the relevant vital operations of a company. And one of the key elements here is that we always look at not just setting this up for some kind of like academic reason, but also always thinking about the purpose of this level, the detail that is required here, and for whom it is actually set up. And this is something that we can then clearly argue towards the customers, where they can look at examples in our reference library And here, from there, they can also understand and communicate internally how to adopt to this process architecture. So, and if you want to read more about this architecture, we have on our website quite openly the whole description of these levels and how they sit as, are what the, examples, what the conventions are, the methods are behind it. And we also provide our customers or people that are interested also the whole process repository in as a demo in the web, where people can actually kind of like have a look at the examples that we've built up. And to understand, maybe to relate to the challenges a company has, is that you need to translate whatever you're doing as a business model. I want to sell bicycles, or I want to sell industrial plants. I need to translate it into, let's say, a language that a manager can understand, but somebody from operations. I need to translate it in a form that business can understand it, but also IT when they go and automate it. And this is where the processes and the structure comes in place, because it helps people align on the objectives and the strategy of a company in order to do their job better. And we're not just talking about the person that sits in a factory or maybe in purchasing, how they know how to do their operations better, but also for an IT man to understand how to automate the processes better. Yeah, so the whole organization, the operative organization, but also the change, the people related to the transformation of a company, they all have one common platform to have a common understanding of the objectives of a transformation, but also the objectives of the organization. One of the key concepts in all this doing is that, coming from the past, companies always thought in departments and always thought very functional. So here you would typically say, what do you need to be able to do your business? Oh, I need to make something. I need to produce something. And if I produced it, then I need to store it. In order to produce it, I need to buy raw materials that I actually then somehow process. And so for each of the departments that a company needs, also the relating to their departments and related to their business functions, also functional processes were defined. And typically, and in the past, companies would take these, they would manage these in a professional manner, and they would also optimize these. The typical proceedings here are like Lean Six Sigma, and they would optimize them. What was missing, though, is the interaction between these different departments. So one of the biggest, say, non-streamlined areas was not so much that people didn't know how to do customer relation management, but they didn't really manage well in the way they actually communicated with the warehousing, how they planned their products, or maybe with the production, so they adapted to the quality that was required by the customer. So where these big enterprises really struggled with was the interaction and the integration between departments. From an IT perspective, this is where SAP, as an ERP system, for example, had a really big advantage because they really managed this integration on a functional level. However, adapting such a system and getting the people to work in an integrated fashion, this is something where you need a certain kind of methodology in order to support this. And this is what we also, one is called the end-to-end view. So taking each of these departments with their processes, for example, pre-order management, you have here what kind of processes and functions do pre-order management, let's say, people do, roles involved in this. So they approve and send out quotations, they create inquiries, they create quotations, they send quotations. So these are all the classical functions. But how does this work together in a specific case? This is where the end-to-end view comes into place. Now, a lot of people discuss about end-to-end and they think,
Russell,
oh, well,
a quick
yeah,
question from my side. Back to the organizational view, so the process groups view. Just wanted to
yep,
throw in there that typically when these companies structure their kind of departmental processes in this way, they often define roles. So who is responsible for creating orders, who is responsible for approval. But But what's typically missing is that how do these roles within a specific department interact with each other, right? And whether they are roles which are basically responsible for these alignment or kind of cross-departmental roles or something like that, right? This is typically not clear with taking solely a functional view. Yeah.
And if you look at each of these processes now, I think in one of the previous sessions we talked about the different industries like chemicals and pharmaceuticals, and if you looked at these, they are so, let's say, generic that you wouldn't really identify. Looking at this single process, you couldn't say, is this process now suitable, or is it something from a chemical discrete manufacturing, or is it from pharmaceuticals? You wouldn't really see the specifics of this business or the business model or the type of product. You couldn't really see this within the functional process. However, and this is something, as we were talking about the different business models and what is that was actually driving this business, if you then look at these end-to-end scenarios, you can see that they are quite specific for dedicated industries. Now, just what we do from here, if you're looking at this view, we are talking about, say, this is kind of like the structuring process landscape. Yeah, so here we have the domains. One of the main reasons we actually have these different end-to-end domains is not because they are always in itself end-to-end from customer, say, order to customer cash. Sometimes you need to decompose the complexity and therefore define domains in order to also allocate ownership and to bring in a certain kind of like expertise also into this topic. So what we typically have, this is also something that is slightly adjusted for customers, but even here we see that a lot of different industries have a very similar view on what domains they have. Lead to opportunity, order to cash, forecast to plan, procure to pay, plan to produce, inbound to outbound with all these logistics topics, account to report are, let's say, common domains where within these the very specific scenarios are elaborated for a dedicated business model. And one of the good examples is, and this also shows actually what are the added values of our business flows is, what we did is then from a given set of standard processes, we have looked at different industries and looked at the different ways they do business. And based on these, we have compiled a comprehensive set of end-to-end scenarios. So when I'm selling order to cash, from the order to the cash, there are different ways of doing this. And a company will always typically also have variants of how he conducts this order to cash business. And typically the sum of these scenarios represents very much more specific the business model and let's say the operating model of a company. So for example, sales of stock products is selling products that you've already produced prior to actually the order of a company, of a customer, and you've put it on stock and then you sell it. So when would you do that? You would do that, first of all, if you want to be able to provide your customer in a very fast manner with the product. And you can only really do this if you have a highly standardized product. And in order to have a low cost of production, you will do it en masse, and you will not do kind of like for each order, start the production and then put it on and then send it to the customer, because this would have of course, a commodity product. You would rather produce one big batch, put it in the warehouse, and then sell it off. So depending on, as I said, the speed that the customer wants it, the standardization level of the product, you could do this. But in many cases, depending on your business model, what kind of products you sell, what requirements your product has, you can't do this. And then a different way of doing order to cash comes into place. For example, the make to order, where you do not have this product standardized. You do not have it in your warehouse waiting for the customer to order it. Maybe also because it may decay. So, or maybe just because the warehousing costs for it are too big. Very different reasons in the business model that say, I do not want to produce it upfront. I want to wait for the order to come, and then I try to produce it as fast as possible according to the requirements of the customer. There's also always a balance there as well to be efficient. And when you go through these scenarios, each one, and we have a very dedicated description actually showing what the actual specifics of this business case is, of the scenario, when it comes into, when it can become relevant. So here, for example, you don't even produce yourself, you do it via subcontracting. Sometimes you just you get the order and you don't produce it, you just buy it and have it sent directly to the customer. So there's a lot of different variants here, and we have kind of like compiled a comprehensive list, and a company can then first of all understand the way we have structured it, the architecture, based on these examples, and he can adopt it very fast by, let's say, deleting the ones he doesn't use and changing, renaming, and adjusting the ones that he wants to use. Each of these scenarios not just only has a description, but also has, this is why the name business flows, and this is the key of actually our offering here, is all around a sequence of processes. So these standardized, let's say, generic functional processes that we had in place, which are also kind of like commonly known, we have then put together to represent this specific end-to-end scenario. And doing this in a manner that we have these something like 500 processes, and we have compiled them into combinations of sensible, relevant end-to-end scenarios, which are now currently something like 120 end-to-end scenarios. This knowledge of the way processes have to be linked up in order to serve a specific business case, this is exactly a knowledge that we manage. And in addition to the reference and providing this as an example, we are also highly trained and a specialist in actually adapting this to represent exactly the way the customer is doing his business, and from there to drive standardization and optimization initiatives within the organization. This is really the starting point of everything. And here you will see then each of these processes here occurs somewhere also in a functional library. If you kind of like through, you see that this process exists in very different scenarios. So it's kind of reused. It's a standardized block, and it also is included in somewhere in the functional process library. Yeah? And by keeping this consistent and together, you can then see that this process I just clicked on, it has the requirement to fulfill various different business cases. And so when you're talking about what does this process have to be able to, provide, it definitely has to provide all the requirements of these different scenarios that are then in scope.
Yeah. And Russell, I'm just thinking of a good exercise, right, for someone who's watching this to kind of like get accustomed to the subject matter. And during the last session, we said that kind of looking at some of our customers and trying to determine their business model, right? So what are they selling? Look into their business model. And I think a good exercise would be kind of like to try to create a map, looking, for example, at the pharmaceutical industry and some of our customers there, and trying to see if they can identify scenarios from our list here that apply to such companies, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think that's one of the things Marcus was, thinking of putting together for the next company day, that we try to do some more exercises on this understanding business and transferring it in this business model into certain end-to-end scenarios.
Yeah.
And what is interesting, so each of these like processes, like execute credit management, you see that this credit management in the context of selling from a stock product or a make to order can have very different implication. Yeah, because a customer, if you have standard products, you've already produced it up front anyway, and depending on maybe the cost of the product, you can be quite lax on the credit, credit checks. If you have a very expensive product that you would just produce for this customer. And if he doesn't buy it or he doesn't pay it, you can't use it for anything else. You would have complete different requirements on checking the credits. So your policies would be changed here. They would be different to another customer. Now, this is not implicitly, if you look at the description, you could see certain aspects of this, and you could also see then a level underneath the activity level, which we then cover in which are the core activities in a BPMN. I don't want to go into the modeling conventions here, but just to say, so we do have a lot of different details on how this process is executed. But this needs to be based on the real requirements of a customer and where he wants to go, what he wants to achieve, which level of automation he wants to achieve, what level of risk mitigation he does, for example, for the credit checks, does he want to achieve? This is where he has to put down his rules and define his requirements for automation based on which he can then optimize and implement a system. Now, what I want to say turn to now is then the aspect, and I think we talked about it about on the business and the different business drivers, is that so when you are kind of like defining your processes and your end-to-end scenarios and your key core, let's say, requirements, you want to link this up to the strategy of your company and what is driving your company, so that when you say, okay, I've got it, this is the process I need, I have different business cases it has to serve, but there are different ways of implementing it. I can have it with a very harsh rule, I can have it highly automated, I can have it very manual. So if I want to take decisions in how explicitly I want to implement this process, I need guiding principles. I need certain guardrails where I then have a clear directive in which direction to design a process and implement it. Yeah? Because there's always different ways of doing things, and you need certain kind of alignment with your top level management and the sponsors of a project. And for this, and this is something where we started off with the process repository, and the more it was used, the more we looked at what additional links to other kind of like aspects of a business transformation can we provide. And one of them was that we wanted to say we want to provide a strategic framework. Yeah, so we want to say a standard methodology over which we can then link in the key, let's say, business drivers, the key aspects of what is actually pushing us to change and what do we have to make sure that is really established when we go to optimize and implement these processes. And here we set up this strategic process framework. So in addition to our process framework, we have a quite a simple but effective strategic framework that is then linked and put into relation to our processes. Yeah, so they need to be connected in order to have a consistent methodology in place. And we got this inspiration from SCORE, which is a council for supply chain operations. And it's a group of people that think a lot about, say, specifically industrial organizations and how they can optimize. And they put down this framework where they say companies need to think about these 5 core dimensions. And typically they have then these set of business drivers, which is actually kind of like let's say that what is actually then the key strategic requirement that has to be then implemented in the processes. So, for example, easiest one is everything to do with cost. A lot of companies always are thinking about how to optimize their cost, and the drivers behind this, and so in how they can actually look at this is say they need or they want to have lean and efficient processes because this has a positive effect on the cost. Well, quite simple. Another way of dealing with costs is to think about centralized structures and functions. So the more centralized you have functions, the more better you can standardize them, you have a better scalability of them, you have more control over them. So this can be something where they say, this is something where in this line of business, certain departments is something where you say, I want to think about my processes in a manner that they are implemented in a way that I can centralize them. And maybe in combination with the lean and efficient processes. Yeah? But on the other hand, maybe which could be in complete contrast to the cost, could be, for example, let's say, take this one, responsiveness, responsive sales processes. So if I, on the one hand, centralize my sales, on the other hand, I want to be responsive, this can be a contradiction. This sometimes responsive sales is because the guy sits on the lap of the customer. He goes there every day. You have a big workforce, sales force that are on site. Yeah. If you have that, so if what is driving you is more responsive sales processes, this could mean that you cannot realize the centralized functions. Or if you want to centralize and have responsive sales processes, you have to have a very efficient CRM system. So over IT, you can maybe manage to be centralized and still keep your responsiveness, which typically would kind of like not work. Yeah, as soon as you have a centralized structure, typically it's not, it loses touch to the customer, so you'd have an issue here. So by defining these drivers upfront to your initiative and linking them to which processes are affected by these business drivers, you can, it helps to then have a solid design that in total takes decisions on details in the process that then will meet management expectations. Yeah, and typically you have different sponsors here as well. So cost would be typically the CFO looking at the whole cost situation of his company, and the sales guy will be incentivized on having pushing up the revenue via sales. So here sometimes there are real contradictory, kind of conflicting objectives that need to be managed.
Yeah.
So here,
Russell,
yeah.
Russell, no, just wanted to add that actually, so in a business transformation initiative, the strategic model and the business drivers that you're showing will dictate the design, right, of your new processes, your new solutions, right? Well, so basically, if you're saying that you want to focus on cost efficiency, you would have to design your operating model so that your processes that you are running really adds to the goal of efficient process, efficient costs, right?
Exactly. And to say on what we do, this is not then something we just as a pure theoretical construct. We always take these methodologies and ideas and put them into a database, into this repository. Yeah, in this case, we're looking at ARIS. Before we were looking at the Business Flows browser. In the background, they are always clearly defined, let's say like a database, objects that have a certain relation. So you can do reporting over them, you can manage them, you can govern them. This is why, and this is where we always build up a certain kind of like systematic and also an IT system to manage then these points. So this model that I just showed on the website is something that we've also built into our Business Flows database. And here for each of these, we call the business drivers, we have also linked up certain elements. And there's two elements we link up with. And also here we have a model behind it. I don't know if it's described in the strategic framework. Let's have a look. No, it's not so much described here, so I'll go back and show it here. So we said, so how do we relate this to the processes? That's the one thing. And the other question is, what do I need to, when I'm looking forward in designing my processes, what can help me achieve a better reliable customer promise? And this is where another term comes in, it's called capabilities. So when you and this is very much driven, there is a business term, business capability, but typically it's put into relation with how can software help you do something better. And in our environment, we work a lot with SAP. So SAP has also defined a big set of capabilities, which are clustered around achieving a certain business value. And we have then taken these and looked at saying, okay, if I want to achieve reliable customer promise, which processes are relevant in the context of achieving reliable customer promise, and which IT capabilities can help me, let's say, automate these processes, optimize these processes in order to do this in a manner that really enhances reliable customer promise. So there's these two are linked together. And we've done this, let us go back to kind of like, so each of these, we have, so on the one hand, we have linked up all this repository of end-to-end scenarios. It's empty. Yeah, something I did complain about. We created, is there anyone in there? Let me have a look. Oh, no, it has to be transferred. I'll show it another time. So we created a big matrix where we have then the business drivers and the end-to-end scenarios of a domain, and we've put them into relation with each other. We do this via matrix, and the other model that we have is that we have taken each of these. For example, I'll take the excellence in execution. Let's have a look. Yep. And here we've taken each of these business drivers and mapped them out to capabilities, system capabilities that can help me achieve excellence in execution and delivery. So this object is linked to the processes, and on the other hand, it's linked to the capabilities. And when discussing with the customer his operating model, defining his business scenarios, we can also then support him in defining his objectives, his business drivers, and then giving a guideline for the people that are optimizing these processes, what topics to focus on in designing their processes. Best case, which IT capabilities can support him in achieving this. Yeah, so this kind of like comes together in a design phase. Yeah, so before actually then going into implementation, it really helps clarity, alignment, setting objectives, and also going down the line of scoping functions that will help you achieve exactly the objective that I have put into plan. What we have to just maybe show that in a bit in how that kind of like works out. Let's go here. So I'll take this one first. So what we've done here is we've this relation, that the matrix, it wasn't shown, it was empty, but the relations are in the database. Yeah, I just I've checked this. So if I go here, what I've done is in this dashboard, I'm just more or less selecting which business drivers have been linked to this scenario. And I can see that in our mapping, as a kind of like a predefined content we provide the customer, we say, look, the business driver reliable customer promise definitely has, so this is kind of like a reverse view of this relation. It says order to cash sales from products, so typically all the order to cash scenarios are typically influenced, or the reliable customer promise is influenced by this end-to-end scenario. So if I have this process, this end-to-end scenario in my company, then definitely I can influence reliable customer promise. Or if you kind of reverse the relation, it says, if I want to achieve reliable customer promise, I need to check if this process needs optimizing, needs to be optimized. On the other hand, if I select this reliable customer promise, this bottom dashboard will show me all the related, this is the model I showed before, to achieve reliable customer promise. I have SAP capabilities, advanced order promising, which helps you, and this is kind of like a description on how this capability helps you achieve reliable customer promise. I have an advanced order capturing functionality, and I have order promising capabilities in SAP that all can help me, if I implement them, help me streamline this scenario in order to achieve reliable customer promise. So look at it, say this kind of like the initial kind of like setup of the repository in the pretext of actually changing the processes. We provide a framework of reference processes and architecture that can really speed up the capability of the customer to define his business model in a manner that helps him align with management, helps him align between business and IT, helps him put into context the objectives of the transformation here with the dedicated processes that need to be changed and transformed, and also gives help and guidelines on what capabilities should be or could be taken into consideration in order to optimize this scenario in the context of this objective. So this is something that is all there as content. So it's something that a customer doesn't have to kind of like build up from scratch, but he can use this to streamline it and customize it to his setup and his requirements, and take this then in order for the team to move forward in direction of the initiative. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think we covered quite a lot. I mean, going from the history of business flows, how we went from the process repository, thinking a bit further through to the whole strategic framework, and how this can actually be used for the detailed design of a transformation, right? So thanks a lot for that, Russell. I think we've covered that for today, what we plan to cover, right? That would be fine for today. Like I said, so for some good exercises would be kind of like to look at, first of all, look at these elements that we discussed, go into our website, go into the process repository and have a look, and also see if you can build a relation between the companies that we work with and the different operating models. And also maybe in one of the following sections we can already start to discuss some of the use cases where we applied these models and what the results were out of that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Thanks a lot. I think we can cut it for today.
Okay.
Speak soon.
Speak to you soon.
Thanks Russell.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.